Hello and welcome to another edition of What Does the Giraffe Say with me, Kathleen Retourne. We're an organisation that aims to reconnect people with conservation efforts around the world using interviews on social media platforms. Just to warn you that I actually am based in the Caribbean and we have got a storm forecast and it's coming in pretty fast. So if it does cut out, then I do apologise and we will try to reschedule for another date. Meanwhile, with me today, I have Andrew Campbell from Game Rangers Association of Africa, and he's the CEO of this organisation. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the upcoming World Rangers Day and the things that the organisation does to support rangers. So Andrew, I'm going to hand over to you. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became the CEO of Game Rangers Association of
Hi
Africa.
Kath, thanks for having me on your show. Yeah, I've been the CEO of Game Rangers Association since 2015 and involved with the organisation since 2012, where I was appointed to their committee to look after the business management side of things. So it's been 8 years and having lots of fun. We're involved in some great projects. I grew up here in South Africa, sort of from a line of a family that's been involved in conservation since the 1920s. So I guess it was always in the blood. And yeah, I grew up, in between our farm in the Natal Midlands, and always had a passion for getting into the wild areas and going to the bush on holidays as a kid and spending time on the farm and the outdoors. So I didn't think of myself sitting behind a desk as much as I do now, but I've definitely enjoyed being out and about in the field and working with rangers.
And then how did you get involved working with the organisation now? Did you have a career before that and moved into this? What was the background then?
I started working in conservation areas in about 20 years ago, more on the ecotourism and guiding side of things. But always, my passion was always to move into the conservation side. I think a lot of people in conservation use guiding and the ecotourism sector as a springboard into conservation. And that's sort of what happened with my career. And yeah, I ended up doing some studies. I obviously learned a lot working in outdoor areas about conservation, but ended up formalizing that through some studies, which sort of culminated in doing my master's in environmental management, and then sort of launching into the conservation sector.
And you haven't looked back since?
No, not at all. I certainly don't see myself, getting out of the industry. It's an industry in great need, and I think, having met so many amazing people in it, definitely found my home.
Part of what your organisation does is provide support and representation for rangers across Africa. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Any challenges here and what that actually entails?
Sure. So we look at ranger support. We run a couple of projects on that, and I'll talk you through some of those. One is called Ranger Skills, which is about providing training, mentoring and leadership development for rangers across Africa. And we have a bursary fund that we set up about 6 or 7 years ago that trains a number of rangers every year in specialized skills. We've also got a program called Ranger Gear, which is about providing basic equipment to rangers. Ranger Guide, which is sort of guiding best practice, going into reserves, doing needs analysis of what rangers need in the field. And then Ranger Networks, which is about obviously connecting rangers. Everyone works in different areas across Africa, and it's a constant challenge to keep rangers in communication with each other. So that's a really important aspect. And then, as you mentioned, also representing rangers. So being the voice for African rangers, profiling them in a positive way, showing the amazing work that they do, and also raising the profile of rangers and really, trying to help tell the world, why rangers are important and why they should be considered essential services.
And what kind of support do they need? Is that financial support? Is that helping with education? What kind of things does that entail?
A lot of our projects concentrate around ranger welfare issues. So that's, it can be from, we've got a great project called Ranger Protect, which provides insurance to rangers, so medical evacuation, accidental death and disability cover, and the like for rangers. We've also been involved in a project where trauma counseling for rangers that have been in armed contacts, and these kind of things. So, support varies, and each reserve is different in terms of what the needs of those ranger teams is. And that's why we encourage people that are wanting to support rangers to really get to grips with what that particular protected area needs and what that ranger team needs. It can be simple things from socks and boots, which some rangers are in need of. Other areas might need fuel, so that they can get out on patrol and be deployed into areas. And other places might, as I say, need trauma counseling because of the amount of armed contacts that rangers are exposed to. So it varies greatly. There are over 8,000 protected areas in Africa, so there's no one size fits all there.
And is it all across Africa that you work alongside, and do you team up and partner with different organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're exposed to about 25 different countries in Africa. There are some countries where we're not active yet, but we're certainly working towards that. And we have good representation across the continent. The GRA was formed in South Africa 50 years ago, so we've always been strong in Southern Africa. But in the last 5 years, we've really grown in East Africa and West and Central as well. Where we have, we have a chapter model where we set up chapters in different countries, and we also work with existing ranger associations. And a model that we've really seen working is working with NGOs that are based in countries supporting specific parks and specific ranger teams. They're on the ground, and we can work with them and support them either by giving them access to ranger insurance or combining efforts in terms of applying for grants to support their ranger teams. So very much a cooperative model, yeah.
Okay, and you touched on it briefly earlier, but rangers are doing an incredibly dangerous job. They're often away from their family for a long period of time, in isolated areas. They're having to deal with all different kinds of weather. They're also having to deal with wild animals, also the threat and the reality of coming up against armed poachers. What sort of support do you do them for their mental health? Because not just physically, but mentally, this is going to take a huge toll on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize is exactly as you say. There's one thing supporting them physically, so things like the medical evacuation cover, extremely important. As you mentioned, rangers are working in really remote areas, so sometimes that just getting support to rangers is exceptionally hard. They can be a 2 to 3 day trip to get a vehicle into areas. So aerial support becomes really crucial. From the mental side, there's a couple of things. One is, first of all, mentally preparing rangers for the threats that they're going to encounter. Threat levels vary greatly across the continent as well. In places like Democratic Republic of Congo, rangers are coming up against armed militia groups that can number up to 500 and are really exposed to a high level of armed contacts. And in those sort of areas, it's really important that rangers do have, mental preparation for what kind of tasks and what kind of conflicts they're going to get into. Along that comes with building confidence in terms of their skills base. So making sure they have the right skills, that they're confident when they get into these situations, whether it's dealing with, tracking black rhino in KwaZulu-Natal or coming up against armed militia groups in the Congo. You need to be prepared. You need to have the right equipment. You need to be have the right competency. So and be confident in your skills. So a lot of it is mental, but there's a big overlap between the mental and physical aspects. And then there's also the post-incident care, as we spoke about, through things like insurance and also counseling, debriefing. Part of your job as a ranger team leader would be to ensure that their patrols are debriefed after incidents, where it's an incident with a dangerous animal or close encounter, or after an armed contact, make sure that everyone is debriefed, and then obviously look for signs where further help might be needed.
And is that part of your network program as well? Do you put people in touch to help support each other if they've gone through tough times?
Yeah, absolutely. We see massive benefits in terms of linking rangers. Often rangers work in a specific park. They might spend their entire career, spanning 30 to 40 years working in a single park. And it's very easy to think that you're doing this alone sometimes, whereas we estimate that there's over 40,000 rangers in Africa. And it's really important that we speak to each other, that we communicate, that we share not only our experiences, but what works and doesn't work in the field, and also get exposed to what other rangers go through. Sometimes they go through things a lot worse than we do. In some countries, rangers, we always say in some countries rangers chase poachers, in other countries, militia groups chase rangers. And it's, the levels of support to rangers vary hugely. Some teams are really well supported, and some teams are woefully supported, in terms of the amount of their living conditions, their wages, and the support they receive from their employers. So it's important that rangers talk, that they understand that they're not in this alone, that that we can build some sort of camaraderie across the ranger corps, and also sharing of experiences, and as I say, of best practices. There's a lot of things we can learn from each other. They're rangers with huge amount of experience. We've got in our networks, we've got rangers that have spent 40 years in the Kruger National Park as section rangers, and we've got people that are just starting off on their career as rangers. So we can all learn from each other, and we really got to share between the network.
And have you had any defining moments where you thought, this is exactly why I'm in the job I'm doing? Have you got any good success stories?
I think there's always a bit of fun being out in the field, and certainly where most of us in conservation feel most comfortable is not sitting in front of a laptop, but actually being out in the field. Whether it's going on patrol with ranger teams, or just meeting the other people in conservation. I gave that one some thought, and I thought one of the moments for me was being out doing some ranger needs assessments with some of the teams, and climbing trees when inquisitive black rhino come to your feet, and you sort of look down and trying to take photographs with your cell phone, thinking, okay, I think I've found my happy place. But for me, honestly, it sounds a bit of a cliche, but whenever you meet the people on the ground, they're the real heroes. They're out there every day with the sun on their backs, doing the hard work. And when we get a chance to sit down with them on a patrol, or even at a ranger base, and share some stories, hopefully get them some support, and just listen to some of their experiences. Whenever we get that opportunity, we're grateful and we're privileged to do what we do.
Okay. Well, I've only got one more question left, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So if you're back home and you'd like to ask a question, then please pop it on the comments section, and then I'll put it towards Andrew. But from me, basically, I wanted to ask, Friday is World Rangers Day, and I wanted to know why you think it's important and what people back home can do to support us.
And I think, for me, World Ranger Day is it's, in the work we do, every day is Ranger Day, but it's a chance for the world to sort of sit back for the day and acknowledge, first of all, we release through the International Ranger Federation and the Thin Green Line Foundation, we release a Roll of Honor, which is a worldwide list of rangers that have fallen in the last 12 months. There's a figure that's often quoted in the press, about 1,000 rangers being killed in the last 10 years. We think that that's a lot higher, and we can only note the deaths that are reported. I know we put together the African Ranger Roll, which every year we lose over 60 rangers in the last few years a year, and most of those, close on 50 to 60% of those are in armed conflicts. So, it's a day about taking some time to acknowledge the fallen heroes of conservation, and acknowledging the work that they've done, acknowledging the sacrifices that they have made and that their families have made, and then also acknowledging those that are still out there in the field that are facing these risks. As you made mention earlier, rangers are facing many risks. When we look at the honour roll, we obviously see things like rangers being killed by militia groups, shot by poachers, killed by people illegally grazing their cattle within protected areas. Rangers are also drowning. They're dying in car accidents. They're getting dreaded diseases like malaria in the places that they work. So there's a multitude of risks that they face. So just acknowledging those that are still in the field facing those risks. And then, what's really exciting with this World Ranger Day from our perspective is also announcing some support projects in terms of how we're going to be supporting rangers going forward. And we'll have to save some of those for World Ranger Day itself. But another thing we're going to be doing is announcing the winners of the Rhino Conservation Awards, which is an awards program that we're involved with for those working in endangered species conservation. And that's really acknowledging, some of the leaders in our field and recognizing the work that they do.
And so people back home, what would be the best way for them to help them?
I think that, on World Ranger Day, it's about spreading awareness. It's about, getting involved if you can from a support point of view. And support can be anything from, sharing a Facebook post and saying your bit about why you think rangers are important, to getting involved in some of the ranger support programs, so sponsoring a ranger with ranger insurance. It only costs $30 a year to do that. So there's some very sort of low end entry points in terms of where support can be leveraged for rangers, and we encourage people to get involved and look out for some of our announcements during World Ranger Day, and they'll have a better idea of how they can help.
Excellent. Okay, we've got a comment from Henry Smith, and he's just agreeing with you that it's incredibly important to be looking after people's mental health from service all the way through to the junior level. I think he comments as well that camp and lodge managers are also under a lot of pressure during these times mentally as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, that's the thing that we need to remember at the moment is the world that rangers face is a complex and a difficult one at the best of times. What this whole COVID pandemic has just added a whole another level of complexity and hardship to their world. It's affecting obviously communities where rangers come from that surround reserves. They're worried about their families. They're spending a long time away from their families due to lockdown pressures and isolation issues. So there's a whole bunch of extra issues on the table for rangers at the moment. And as he points out, across the ecotourism sector as well, which, as we know, a lot of conservation areas are reliant on ecotourism for conservation funding.
Yeah, and are people still being able to support their rangers financially during these difficult times?
It varies. It varies from place to place. We're involved with a project that that is looking to address some of that, and then that'll be announced soon. But what we have done during that project is reached out to a lot of ranger teams, and it seems to vary from place to place. Some ranger teams are almost solely relying on ecotourism funding, and so they've been severely impacted, and rangers have been placed on in some areas 30 to 50% of their existing salaries, which are low to start with. Other rangers have been laid off, and ranger bases closed down. We've heard of a number of instances of that. And in other areas, there are some projects that are quite resilient in terms of their funding models. They've got supportive donor networks. So it really varies from place to place. And obviously we're working towards trying to assist those that that haven't got the funds in place. What we want to try and do is keep as many rangers in the field doing the work they do. As we know, rangers services most governments have recognized that they provide essential services, and so we need to keep them in the field.
Sure. We've also got another comment from Linda. She's asking, if the work is so dangerous, money's not so great and you're living in bad conditions, what prompts people to become rangers?
You know, you've got to understand, I think in a lot of these areas, there's very little else on the table. So, you know, a lot of people get into the profession because it's something that they aspire, and you know, they feel a connection with nature, and they want to get involved in conservation. A lot of other people do the job because it's the only job on offer in some of these areas. And I think, you know, the important thing to recognize there is that these protected areas and these conservation areas provide opportunities to people living in proximity in the local communities. They're a source of jobs, there's a source of, you know, a way out of poverty for some people. And so we've got to acknowledge that, you know. We'd obviously love every ranger to be in it for the passion, but we also allow for the fact that some people, you know, need to put bread on the table. And a lot of rangers are the sole breadwinners in the communities that they come from, and they support, you know, up to 20 people in some areas off a single salary, which has now been reduced to you know, 50% of what it was. So I think, you know, a lot of people in the press make a bit of an issue about rangers being in conflict with communities. Rangers are from the communities. They support communities, and a lot of our work is reaching out to communities through community relation efforts up in East Africa. Rangers do a lot of human-wildlife conflict mitigation, and so rangers, you know, should be working hand in hand with communities and supporting them.
And then kind of following on from that, I know as well from my time in Africa that you're right, that a lot of the rangers are from the communities. Do they ever find any backlash? Because if someone's going out poaching for bushmeat because they're hungry, for example, do they ever find any backlash from that because they're the ones stopping them?
Yeah, I think it depends. You know, it depends which areas you look at, and it's, as I say, it's very hard to come with a one-size-fits-all answer sometimes, because we're just talking about a huge amount of protected areas here. But absolutely, and that's why we say conflict mitigation is really a key task and a key skill that rangers need to understand. There's obviously areas where small-scale poaching, you know, has been there for many years, hundreds of years, in terms of you know, poaching for the pot. What we have seen, obviously in the last while, is the upscale of commercial poaching. So, you know, which takes things to a new level. So it's not just about feeding your family, but it's actually tying into a commercial operation. And then obviously we've got the poaching of iconic species like rhino and elephant and pangolin for, you know, organized crime syndicates. So, you know, poaching it's also hard to box poaching, and you know, there are many types of poaching, but certainly it's something that rangers deal with on a daily basis. Rangers are threatened, their lives are put at risk, and I think that's a really important skill that good rangers have, is how to mitigate conflict, how to show the community the value that they're providing. A lot of areas, you know, rely on conservation areas. Sorry, a lot of communities rely on conservation areas for you know, provision of materials, thatch grass, building sand, meat, and you know, there's a very strong link between community areas and conservation areas, and rangers need to you know, work on improving that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head as well, because without the community backing, conservation efforts can't work. So to have that education and trying to get everyone on board, that's the only way really that we can start to make a difference.
Yeah, and rangers are, you know, are the ambassadors for conservation areas in the communities. They understand what's happening in the conservation areas, and yeah, it's our job to also be you know, to work in environmental education and talk to people about what happens and why conservation is important. And I think, you know, there's a lot of protected areas have some amazing you know, sort of outreach programs now, and there's a lot of pressure on those that don't to make sure they are providing benefits for communities, because as you say, you know, without community support, the model will not work.
Okay, well, that's everything that I've got so far. Is there anything that you want to wrap up with before we say goodbye?
No, just I guess a shout out to all the rangers out there. You know, it's a big week for everyone. There's a lot of media attention around rangers for this week, and just wishing everyone out there in the field the best of luck. I hope that, you know, World Ranger Day is also about having some fun. There's often, you know, various initiatives happening at reserve levels. We've been involved in a few over the years where ranger teams compete against each other and things like tug of war and running and you know, various challenges and things. So it's also about having fun, you know, and I think it's really important to highlight that as well. So just wishing everyone the best for Friday. Have some fun, and we hope we continue to support you guys, and let us know how we can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll wrap up now. Thank you everyone back home for watching. If you did want to ask a question and didn't get a chance, or you're watching this later on, feel free to pop a question in the comments and someone will get back to you with a response. Meanwhile, thank you everyone for watching. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Kath.